It's the new year and it's time to look at a new machine, so why not talk about an Atari that's not a 2600? Instead, let's look at this 800 XL. My name is Jesby, this is my tech department. Let's get. The Atari 800 XL arrived in 1983 to little fanfare. Intended to replace the aging and expensive 800 plus the top-of-the-line 1200 XL, the 800 XL was meant to be cheaper to produce and available in time for the 1983 Christmas period. And while both the 600 XL and the 800 XL were out in time, well, the numbers produced were small, essentially missing those Christmas sales. A direct competitor to the Commodore C64, the 800 XL featured 64K of RAM, an impressive color palette of 256 colors to choose from, though only 16 could be shown on screen at any one time in high-res mode, or 128 in low-resolution mode. Sally, a custom 6502B CPU, labeled as a 6502C, but not an official 6502C. Why, Atari, why? Well, that ran at just under 2 MHz, along with the Pokey sound chip that would produce 4 voices of sound. There was a built-in OS and basic ROM, and the machine could use cartridges from the older line of 400/800 machines, though the OS differences often balked a few of the older programs. Finally, there were 2 joystick ports and an expansion interface for various peripherals. I bought this machine at the Vienna Retro Börse back in November for €160. Now, it came with a 1050 floppy drive and power supply, the Atari graphics tablet, though it has a missing pen, and a rather interesting period modem, which is kind of weird, has 2 naked wires on it, but we'll worry about that again. I also grabbed the game as well, since the machine had no software. What it didn't come with was the Atari PSU, so that's our first job, replacing the missing power supply for the computer. So let's start with the basics. The 800 XL requires a 5V supply delivered via a 7-pin DIN socket. 3 pins supply the 5 volts, 3 pins match the ground, and the final pin is to the shield, or, well, another ground. Now, common sense says you'd start numbering the pins at pin 1 through 7, starting here and working around clockwise. But no. Pin 1 is our second pin, with the first pin being pin 6, and the third pin being pin 4. I have no idea why we number pins this way, but we do. To make extra sure, I plug in the disassembled port and just see if it matches up. And sure enough, all the pins on the left-hand side go to ground, and all the pins on the right-hand side don't react with the meter. Excellent. Now, since the Atari runs on a 5V supply, I decide a simple USB to 7-pin DIN plug will be the best way to power this machine. So I grab an old USB to USB-B cable and snip the end off. Now, I'm looking for just the 5V line, ground, and nothing else. And this proves nice and easy, as the red cable is the 5V, the black the ground, and the outer copper cable can double as the shielding ground. The rest of it, the old daily cables, well, they can be snipped short and we can leave it be. To create our plug, we just make sure we put the housing on it first. And believe me, I've done this multiple times over the years. Always make sure you put your housing on first. And then it's just a matter of connecting up our ground and our 5V to the 3 pins each. Now that's a little more tricky. It's doubly tricky so because all you can see is my fingers. But believe me, let's cut to a shot of that finished. But it was not as easy as I thought. For some reason, the solder really didn't want to stick to those pins, which was annoying. Nonetheless, the cable's ready to go. And with that, it's perhaps a perfect time to tell you about today's sponsor, PCBWay. We all know that PCBWay make fantastic PCB boards, starting from just $5, and include things like, well, getting a replacement board for this old ZX Spectrum. What happens if your 3D printer isn't up to the task? Or you're having a little trouble with your CNC machine? Then look no further than PCBWay. In fact, if you can design it, PCBWay can help make it a reality. PCBWay. Way more than just PCBs. For more information, check out the link in the description below. Right, okay, so the Atari is powered back up. I've got a TV that has an analog tuner that I can use. Let's see how we're gonna do with this. And oh, that's disappointing. Black screen. Yay. All right, let's try and get into the diagnostics, shall we? Fortunately, the Atari comes with its own diagnostics. The way to do it, hit the option key and switch on the power. Light comes on. We have, again, black screen. Right, if I go select and start, that should run the audiovisual tests and yeah. Okay, right. Plan B. So plan B involves this game cartridge. You see, when you insert a game cartridge, it bypasses the basic ROM and, well, basically loads itself into the system. It'll tell us if things like the CPU, the OS, ROM, or even the POKey are working or not. So, does it help? Let's take a look. Right, okay, let's switch it on. And, well, there's pole position. Well, that's good, that's good. I'm going to hit start, because I think we need to hit start to get the sound running, because it's very quiet. So, oh, there it is. Sound. Excellent. That's great news. And as you can see, the game is, well, it's doing its thing. I'm not actually pushing any buttons, so that's interesting. And I don't think I've got a compatible joystick here that'll work. But the game is running and it's working, so that's cool. Can I turn left or right? Any of these keys work? No! Boom. I can reset the cartridge and will it come back up? Yeah, it's all fine. Okay. So, what next? Well, I think we're going to have to dive in and take it apart. So let's start with the disassembly process. To begin with, we have to flip the machine over, grab the old iFixit kit, and remove 6 screws. That's all that holds the case together, although we do have to be careful, and you'll see why in a moment. Yes, the keyboard is held in by a ribbon cable and we have to be really careful in removing it because we don't want to damage it. The last thing I want to do now is replace the membrane on this. But with the cable removed, the keyboard lifts away. Next. Next up, well, we'll just give it a quick dust. There's a few dust bunnies in here, but generally it's actually pretty clean. Not bad for a machine that's coming up to 40 years old. Actually, it's over 40 years old. I'm over 40 years old. Ah, crap. Now, the main board is still held in there with 2 screws, and you have to undo those before we can remove it from the bottom case. As you can see, Atari have a habit of over-engineering their systems, and this cost-reduced version of the original 800 is still pretty much way up there in build quality. To finally remove the heat shield, there are a number of screws underneath the board that have to be taken out, and yeah, I actually don't know whether this machine has been out. It looks like there's fingerprints on the back of the board, but these screws are pretty tight in there. They're kind of reluctant to come out. Nonetheless, with a bit of effort, managed to get them all out and reveal the main board in its entirety. Inside, it's fantastic news. It seems that every chip on this board has been socketed, and possibly from the factory. This is great news because if there is a problem, we can quickly swap out a chip to test without having to desolder anything. This is a huge win when it comes to 40-plus-year-old boards because they can always be damaged very easily. However, from the look at this, The board is fine, there's no sign of obvious damage apart from a few dust bunnies, and even underneath, I mean, oh, those traces are kind of gorgeous to look at. And yeah, there are no problems. So that kind of leaves us in an awkward position. What do we do about our basic ROM? Well, since I have the machine out, I may as well take the basic ROM out and see if it helps. Now, quite often, removing a chip and reseating it can help because they kind of get stuck after 40 years and corrosion builds up. So just loosening it off kind of helps. Sadly, that's not the case here, and although the chip is quite stiff coming out and I take my time with the chip lifter, as you can see, all I find is a bit of a cheap socket and nothing else. Replacing the chip after I'm done, the problem still remains, and that leaves us with one issue. How do we fix a computer whose basic ROM is, well, frankly, no longer available? I can't pick spares up off the shelf for this one. So how do we fix it? Well, maybe that's a problem for next time. Well, it's unfortunate we had to stop there. With the basic ROM not working, there's not much else we can do with this machine except for playing pole position, which is not a terrible idea, but, there are more important things we can have fun with this machine with. For example, we still don't know if that disk drive works, and we won't know until we get the basic ROM up and running. We also don't know what to do with that modem, so that's going to make a very interesting second part of this video, I think. And maybe I can get hold of that graphics tablet pen, and we can see if we can get that working as well. All that's left to say now is thank you so much for watching. Below, you'll find all our social medias. They'll pop up now, and you could always feel free to follow us there. Occasionally, I remember to post things on Instagram, so you can actually see stuff I am working on. And all that's left to say really is, when it comes to old machines like this, remember to reuse, rediscover, and you never know. You might find your own Atari 800XL just waiting for you somewhere, hoping you've got a basic ROM as well. My name is JSP. This has been my tech department. Cheers.